The Zelda franchise has always featured a solid selection of iconic weapons. A selection that has only grown in recent years. What the fuck is that? From the trusty slingshot to the fabled hero's bow, the series has managed to almost give these weapons a soul, making them an integral part to not only the combat but also the puzzles and in some cases the overarching stories being told. That being said, there's one weapon in particular that has almost certainly cemented itself as a linchpin within the franchise. A weapon so legendary that you'll most likely stumble across references to it in a completely different subset of games. This one's kinda small though. This sword goes by many names. The Blade of Evil's Bane, the sword that seals the darkness, but by far the most recognizable of them all is the legendary Master Sword. The sword is often sought after as one of the final goals to achieve before ridding the world of evil, which got me thinking, just how far into each of these games is the Master Sword, and how long does it take to actually obtain it? Now, I decided to only include 3D Zelda games as I don't personally own copies of the Oracle games, and this video is already long enough. Just a further heads up, I'm not a professional speedrunner if you couldn't tell, so these will be more casual runs and won't feature any bug abuse or glitches either. I also won't be skipping any cutscenes, and our timer begins after we take control of Link for the first time. With that out of the way, let's figure out just how fast we can obtain one of the most iconic weapons in video game history. Nostalgic, isn't it? Unfortunately, we don't have time to sit in awe of this masterful title screen. As you'd expect, our journey begins with Ocarina of Time, which not only marks the franchise's introduction to the 3D landscape, but also my personal introduction to the franchise as a whole. The game begins with Link being woken up by Navi, where she tells us that the Great Deku Tree has summoned us. Before we can make our way over there though, we first need some equipment, those being the Kokiri Sword and the Deku Shield, which cost us 40 rupees. There's plenty of methods to collect rupees, but the easiest and fastest in my opinion is to simply jump over these platforms, as they award 5 rupees each time and can be reset by going into buildings. With the sword and shield in hand, we can pass by Mido the bum and chat with the Deku Tree. From here we clear out his insides, which unfortunately kills him in the process, but not before he can give us the Kokiri Emerald, the first of 3 spiritual stones that we'll be needing to open the Door of Time. From here we march our way over to Hyrule Castle, where I quickly farmed up a few more rupees to upgrade our shield to the Hylian Shield. Now this isn't an essential step by any means, but I decided to do it because it doesn't really take that long to farm up the rupees in the first place, and this shield is just better and can't burn. From here we grab an egg from Malon before sneaking past what I imagine are highly trained guards. As we near the castle itself, our egg conveniently hatches into a fully grown chicken, which we can use to wake up Talon. He scurries off to check on Malon while I tapped into every single IQ point my tiny brain could muster up to figure out this incredibly complex puzzle. We do a little more sneaking around before reaching the castle courtyard, where we stumble across a stalker. Never mind. Zelda here claps us with an unbearably long cutscene, which honestly made me question my no skipping cutscene rule. Was this always this long? We're then taught Zelda's Lullaby by Impa before being directed towards Death Mountain. Ominous names aside, the trek up this mountain isn't actually that bad, and before you know it, we're inside the Goron city. Unfortunately, Darunia here won't give us the item we need, so instead we venture off to get lost in the Lost Woods, before eventually finding Saria, who looks to be lost herself. Now instead of admitting that, she tries to distract us by teaching her song instead, and because we're Ocarina savants, we instantly learn the new song and go back to play it for Darunia. As thanks, he gives us the Goron bracelet, which allows us to pick up bomb flowers, which we'll need to enter Dodongo's cavern. This dungeon isn't particularly long, and after decimating Dodongo himself, Darunia rewards us with the Goron's ruby. We then make our way up to the peak of Death Mountain, where we meet with every kid's worst nightmare. What, just me? Regardless, with 2 spiritual stones collected, our final destination sees us traveling upstream, where we imitate Moses to split the seas, or in this case, the waterfall, granting us access to Zora's domain. Upon arriving in this domain, we have to learn how to dive by playing a short minigame before showing King Zora a letter. He then grants us access into Zora's fountain, where he then grants us access into Zora's fountain, where Jabu Jabu resides. Hurry the fuck up! We then feed Jabu Jabu a fish that are somehow caught in a bottle, and just like that, we're gobbled up. Now I'm going to be honest, this dungeon can get quite confusing, mainly because we have to carry around Princess Ruto half the time, and should you lose her, she'll spawn back in at a certain location. I just wish I knew where that location was before I lost her. So where the fuck am I? Eventually we take out the Baronade boss and escape Jabu Jabu's belly though. Apparently we rizzed up the Zoran princess while doing so, and she gives us the Zora's Sapphire as an engagement ring. With all 3 spiritual stones in hand, we head back to Hyrule Castle where we're greeted with the same cutscene that plays at the start of the game. Zelda then throws us the Ocarina of Time before Ganondorf essentially one-taps us. Ignoring what we just saw, we grab the Ocarina of Time, learn the Song of Time, and then head to the Temple of Time. I'm starting to think this game has something to do with time.
No shit.
Jokes aside, upon entering the Temple of Time, we play the Song of Time, causing the 3 spiritual stones of time to open the Door of Time. Behind this door we see a glorious looking sword, which Navi confirms is the exact one we've been looking for. Wait, what? Honestly though, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the name of this sword, but thankfully this is indeed the legendary Master Sword, bringing our total time to just under 3 hours. Now whether you think that's long or not, I can assure you, it's only going to get longer from here. And in case you don't believe me, let's sail on over to my personal favourite 3D Zelda. Hold up, I know what some of you are asking. What about Majora's Mask? Surely the sequel to Ocarina of Time would also include the legendary Master Sword, right? Nope. Apparently not. Now, as I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by myself, Wind Waker holds a special place in my heart, as it was the very first Zelda game I ever finished. Our journey this time around starts off on Outset Island, where Link is once again woken up by his sister. You can tell Link just doesn't give a single fuck with regards to any of the legends being told in the introduction. Even after witnessing the Helmarok King drop someone into the forest above the island, he still has to be convinced by his sister to go and save them. But first, just like in Ocarina of Time, we need to acquire a sword, and while we're at it, we might as well learn some sweet combat moves. We then climb up the mountainside, defeat some enemies, and save Tetra before leaving to see our baby sister get snatched up by that very same Helmarok King. In order to save her, we ask to join Tetra's pirate crew, but she won't let us unless we have a shield. I'm getting a strong sense of deja vu here. Anyway, we talk to our granny who gives us a shield before crawling under the house to obtain an orange rupee. We'll be needing a lot of rupees later on in order to buy something very important. From here, Link gives one final farewell as we sail off into the distance. Now, after quickly dominating this high ropes course, we arrive at our first destination, the Forsaken Fortress. We're then launched into a wall, forcing us to sneak our way back up to the top. Here we reunite with our sister before being interrupted by the Helmarok King. We then get a quick look at an ominous figure before being dropped into the vast seas below. Now thankfully Nintendo knew better than to put out a game with only 1 hour of content, so instead of drowning, we awake on board a talking boat who calls himself the King of Red Lions. Before we can start training for the Olympic sailing team, however, we need to grab a sail from, this guy, and with that we can finally set sail. Our first destination, Dragon Roost Island. Now this sailing mechanic is honestly one of the bigger time sinks in this game, and as you can see, it's taking us a good while to reach even our first island. Once we do reach Dragon Roost Island though, we're given the Wind Waker before taking a quick detour over to these ruins where I learnt the Wind's Requiem. This allows us to change the direction of the wind, meaning we will always be sailing at full speed. That being said, as we'll come to see, this won't be required for much longer. I also took some time to fly the seagull into these bombs, as doing so drops a chest that contains a silver rupee. Again, we'll be needing a lot of rupees soon. Anyway, we travel up Dragon Roost Island and meet with different members of the Rito tribe. Typical of Zelda games, the baby prince is throwing a fit, and it's up to us to inspire some courage into him by calming down Valoo. To do so, we have to make our way through the first dungeon of the game, which is fairly simple, and after killing Gohma, the annoying pest, we are reunited with the small prince who hands us Din's Pearl, which is the first of 3 goddess pearls that we'll be needing. If you've been paying attention to the timer, you can probably tell by now that, yeah, we ain't beaten Ocarina's Time. From here, we're supposed to head over to the Forest Haven, but instead I took a short detour back to Windfall Island. Now, while Windfall Island is off in a different direction, the item we'll be grabbing is well worth it. Unfortunately, the auction starts at night, and as you can see, it's not night. Thankfully though, we can learn the Song of Passing from the suave guy over here, which allows us to change the time of day whenever we wish. We then enter the auction house and bet our life savings in hopes of winning the Swift Sail. This is an item that was added in the HD remaster of Wind Waker, and not only does it significantly increase our sailing speed, but it makes the direction of the wind obsolete, as it will always be in our favor when using this particular sail. With this OP item in hand, we blitz our way over to the Forest Navel, talk to the Deku Tree, and enter the Forbidden Woods in hopes of saving Makar. This dungeon in particular is relatively slow, as it features mazes with protruding vines and moving platforms that we often have to wait for. That being said, we eventually take out both this moth thing and the final boss, saving Makar in the process. We reunite him with his fellow Koroks, and as a reward, the Great Deku Sentry hands us our second pearl. Now this next section is specifically why I opted to spend some extra time getting the Swift Sail earlier on, as we're going to be doing a lot of sailing. And I mean a lot of sailing. To quickly summarize, we first need to sail over to the Greatfish Isle, which unfortunately has been destroyed. I should also mention that I got caught up in some naval warfare with a few big octos on the way, which, I mean, it's not ideal. From here we hear about our pirate crew camping out on Windfall Island, so back we go to steal some bombs from them. We then have to sail all the way back to Outset Island, where we have to bomb down this rock face, all while continuously being sucked into a whirlpool. Thankfully, after doing all this, Jaboon simply hands over Nehru's pearl. From here we travel to 3 separate triangle islands, placing the respective pearl in each statue's hands. They then form a Triforce symbol, causing the Tower of Gods to rise up out of the ocean's depths. This tower acts as one final test, featuring plenty of puzzles as well as our first encounter with the infamous Darknuts. The tower ends with us facing off against Andros, and after defeating him we ring a bell, causing us to float down towards Hyrule Castle. After completing one final puzzle, a secret staircase opens up to reveal a hidden room that contains the legendary sword. Walking up to the pedestal, Link lifts the sword in all its glory, marking the end of this Wind Waker run at just under the 5-hour mark. For those of you that aren't fans of the charming cel-shaded graphics, you're in luck, as the next game to release is still to this day one of the darkest games to ever grace the franchise. Now within the community, a lot of people like to call games like Ocarina of Time or Breath of the Wild revolutionary, but what I don't hear a lot of people talking about is the fact that Twilight Princess begins with Link wide awake. Now that's revolutionary. Twilight Princess paints Link as the village errand boy, and its prologue has us completing everything from hoarding goats, fishing, throwing hawks, gliding with the help of chickens to reach some extra rupees, buying a slingshot, and then flexing our combat skills in front of the neighborhood kids. Well, at least trying to. We then need to save said kids before returning to complete another round of goat herding. Everyone still with me? Good. Because then we get grilled by Ilia for overworking Epona and have to crawl our way into the springs before being jumped by a group of Bulbin. Conveniently, we had just given away our only means of defending ourselves to the same kids we had just saved, and as a result Ilia gets shot in the back and Link gets smashed across the back of the head with a club. I told you this game was dark. Fortunately, we didn't die on the spot and desperately tried to run after them. This results in us being dragged into a mysterious realm where we turn into a wolf, pass out, and then get dragged to prison by a shadow beast. Wait, what the fuck? Are we sure this is a Zelda game? Now after double checking that I was indeed playing a Zelda game, we're greeted by a little gremlin who may have the best glow up in gaming history. Unfortunately we won't be seeing that glow up in this video, but we do strike a deal with her, and with her help we're able to escape the prison before making our way across the rooftops and into this tower. Here we meet with another mysterious figure, who Minna refers to as the Twilight Princess. Tile drop, wow! The hooded figure then recounts the events that plunged the Kingdom of Hyrule into the shadows, before revealing herself to be... With that massive plot twist out of the way, we return to Ordon Village, sneaking our way around to find our sword and shield, before returning to the spring where we met with the spirit Faron. This begins our first hide and seek game where we have to collect Tears of Light. Because I'm playing the HD version of the game, I only needed to grab 12 instead of the usual 16 as it was in the original. After filling our Vessel of Light, the area around us is restored to its original state, as is Link. Now donning the legendary green tunic, we make our way over to the first dungeon of the game, the Forest Temple. This dungeon takes a considerable amount of time to complete, as it has us rescuing 8 monkeys throughout it. Heck, even getting to the dungeon takes a while, as we're forced to wait around as this monkey slowly clears out the miasma. Halfway through the dungeon we face off against one of the thickest enemies in gaming history, and by the end of it we're battling against... I mean, what's this even supposed to be? Beating it gives us our first fused shadow piece, and following this we travel over to Kakariko Village, where we once again have to play hide and seek with these shadow insects that admittedly are getting a lot better at hiding. As a sort of tribute to Majora's Mask that didn't get much of a feature in this video, I took some extra time to howl a very special piece. Beautiful. Time wasting aside, with the light restored to the area, we're told to trek up Death Mountain and speak with the Goron tribe. There's just one problem though. Yeah, they don't like us very much. In order to gain their respect, we have to backtrack to Ordon Village where we learn how to wrestle from Mayor Bo. Honestly, this is kind of irrelevant because really all we need is the iron boots. The wrestling will have to wait as well as we face off against King Bulbin in a budget jousting fest. That being said, when we do finally knock him off, Link strikes a pose that I haven't been able to forget for over 15 years. Look, I'm not gay, but anyway, in order to gain the Goron's respect, we blatantly cheat with our iron boots, all while beating up on and throwing around an elderly citizen. Apparently this works out though, as we are granted access to the Goron mines, which is, well, it's fucking slow. This mechanic isn't just used once or twice either, it's pretty much used throughout the whole dungeon, essentially matching our pace to that of a slug. Defeating Pharros awards us with our second piece of Fused Shadow, and with it, we can now make our way over to the castle town, where we briefly see Ilya before soaring over to the Zoran domain with the help of a Kargarok. Here we complete our final hide and seek game before being greeted by a delightful cutscene. I told you this game was dark. Anyway, after all that, we find ourselves escorting Ilya and the injured Zoran back to Kakariko village, where we are once again visited by Queen Rutella, who guides us over to the graveyard where we uncover the Zora armor. While we're here, we quickly switch out our regular bombs for water bombs and enter our final temple. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I vividly remember getting lost in this temple when I was younger, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that nothing's changed. Fuck, I think I'm lost. I did eventually make my way to the boss, which is an awkward fight in its own right. Defeating it rewards us with our final Fused Shadow piece, but before we can even marvel at that accomplishment, Zant appears and essentially one-taps both Midna and Link. With Midna on death's door, her lament theme playing in the background, and the end of the world at stake, we zoom back to the Twilight Princess's tower, where she mentions the existence of a legendary blade before sacrificing herself for Midna. To reach this blade, we have to make our way back through Farron Woods, where we reunite with our monkey friend. Unfortunately, we're greeted by puppets instead, and before long we realize the Skull Kid is controlling them. After playing hide and seek with him and then clapping him, we're faced with one final puzzle before the doors to the Sacred Grove open up. And sitting in its fabled pedestal, almost like it was waiting for us, was the Master Sword. Its power actually restores us to our human form, and with that we're able to finally pull it out, bringing this long ass run to a close. At this point, I thought for sure Twilight Princess would have the longest run, but I had forgotten about one particular game, and funnily enough, it was the very next one I had to tackle. Now, in my defense, I haven't played Skyward Sword in over a decade. That being said, you've probably noticed that I'm playing the HD remaster of this game. Yeah, I may or may not have spent another $80 to buy a game that I already own, and there's really only one reason for that. Nice. Skyward Sword starts off in Skyloft, and would you look at that, Link starts off asleep once again. Now the first thing you'll notice is that this game introduced a stamina bar, which allows us to sprint. Now you'd think this would be a pure benefit, especially in a run such as this, but as we'll come to see, this couldn't be further from the truth. The introduction has us humbling Zelda, to then searching for a Crimson Loftwing, back to humbling Groose, and then winning Quidditch. We then get to share a sweet moment with Zelda, before sharing another sweet moment with Zelda, to then sharing another sweet moment with Zelda. This is just a dating sim. Unfortunately, our cute moments are interrupted by a twister that somehow manages to pull Zelda in while pushing Link out. We awake to find a mysterious entity haunting the building, but knowing this is a Nintendo game and not a horror movie, we decide to follow said entity all the way to the goddess statue where, wait, is that what I think it is? Are we seriously about to finish one of these runs in under an hour? Anyway, it's time we head to Farron Woods, where we quickly hunt down 4 of these Kikwi guys. We're given the slingshot as a reward and fight our way towards the first temple of the game. The temple itself is fairly simple, with relatively quick and easy puzzles, but the biggest time waste in this game are the enemies themselves. Because this game was developed with motion controls in mind, many of the enemies require very specific methods in order to beat them. The most obvious instance of this comes at the end of this temple, where we have our first encounter with Girahim. This guy will constantly catch your blade, if you're not quick enough to trick him, and believe me, his fast movements and annoying gimmicks definitely cut into our runtime quite a bit. Defeating him allows us to Skyward Strike this emblem, granting us the ruby tablet that we have to fly back to the goddess's statue to place. This is Skyward Sword's iteration of Wind Waker's sailing, but thankfully it doesn't take nearly as long. We dive down into the Eldun volcano, this time meeting with the Mogma tribe. Again, this area has some pretty annoying enemies that require some very precise bomb throws to defeat. Not only that, but it also illustrates areas in which the stamina bar isn't so effective, like these hills where you have to wait in between sprinting just to recover the stamina you need to climb them. From here we enter the Earthen Temple, and again it feels like everything in this game is meant to slow you down. To navigate through a significant portion of this dungeon, we have to run atop this ball. Thing is, you can't go too fast or else your momentum will fling Link off the other side, so you're kind of forced into taking your time. Add in hidden entrances, secret passages, and more stamina draining ramps, and you've got a game that's looking like a strong contender against Twilight Princess in terms of Master Sword obtaining. Thankfully, the boss fight against Scaldera is simple, and with him defeated, we briefly reunite with Zelda before being absolutely grilled by Impa. I'm not going to lie, I took this personally. Like, come on. I'm already skipping over so much content just to get grilled by an NPC with pre-programmed text. With my ego in pieces, we pick up another tablet before heading over to Lanayru Desert. Now let me tell you something about this desert. Yeah, so... Anyway. Please... I wanna die. We kill some ancient arachnid, get a harp from Zelda, and return to the sealed grounds once again to talk to old Granny here. We re-imprison the imprisoned before flying into a thunderstorm to reach an isle where we learn about 3 sacred flames, and how we have to overcome a trial to obtain them. These trials involve us having to go around collecting tears inside the spirit realm without being caught by the guardians. The first of these is pretty simple, but these sections truly terrified me as a younger kid. Completing it rewards us with the Water Dragon Scale, which allows us to swim underwater and meet with the Water Dragon. After helping him out, he grants us access to one of the best dungeons in Zelda history. The dungeon itself is fairly short and concludes with an even cooler boss. How can you not love slashing Coloctus with his own weapons? Defeating him allows us to imbue our sword with the first sacred flame, and hold up, is this the moment where... I feel like I'm getting edged or something. Anyway, it's time to head back over to the Sand Sea, where we have to complete another trial, which is still kind of simple, before being awarded with the claw shots. We then have to warp time to sail across the seas before locating an invisible pirate ship that has its very own robot captain. Look, as much as people hate on Skyward Sword, you have to admit it had some absolutely fantastic dungeons. Its bosses are pretty hit or miss though.
What the hell is even that?
After defeating Celia from Monsters Inc., we then can imbue our sword with our second sacred flame, and nope, it's still not the Master Sword. I know what you're thinking, man, it's been over 8 hours. The Master Sword probably doesn't even exist in this game, but I can assure you, it does, and we're getting close. Kind of. First though, we need to complete the final spirit trial. Shit. Before doing a ton of backtracking, all in order to feed some frog statues water, which grants us access to the Fire Sanctuary. The dungeon contains one final roadblock we have to overcome, and it's none other than Girahim himself. This dude is the ultimate cheese abuser, as he's still got that annoying sword grab ability, but this time, he's got even more defensive capabilities. We did eventually get him to draw his swords, which is honestly the easiest section, as I figured out this guy never really blocks from below, so I mean, I was just kind of spamming upward strikes over and over until we finally got him down. After beating his ass down once again, he teleports away, allowing us to finally imbue our sword with the third and final sacred flame. This final flame turns it into the legendary Master Sword, finally putting an end to this run after 10 long hours. This isn't any time to rest, however, as the next game would turn the Zelda franchise completely on its head. What's that? You were expecting Breath of the Wild? Well, I meant it when I said every 3D Zelda, and from what I can tell, Hyrule Warriors is not only a 3D game built around the Zelda franchise, but it's also underrated. I mean, it also contains the Master Sword, and it's underrated. Now, in terms of actual gameplay and whatnot, there's really not much you can do outside of just completing each scenario as fast as possible, which will eventually lead us to the Master Sword. That being said, I guess I can briefly talk about our journey there. We begin with a vision about an imposing darkness that spreads throughout Hyrule. Now, where have we heard this before? With a trusty aide Impa by her side, Zelda sets off to find the new incarnation of the hero, and it's here where they stumble across a young blonde boy who is absolutely decimating the other knights. We all know who this is, and it seems like Zelda does as well, but before she can confirm anything, the castle is attacked by a billion enemies, and I'm not even exaggerating. So begins the first of many carpal tunnel checks. You face off against old bosses, clear out endless mob units, and we even get help from the Great Fairies once again, who have definitely had a glow up since Ocarina. What, just me again? This is essentially all that happens in these games. We travel from location to location, decimating hundreds and thousands of enemies along our path with a multitude of different characters. Following our first scenario, Zelda seems to have gone missing, and it's our job to find her. We travel to the Elden Caves where we team up with a mysterious Sheikah called Sheik. I wonder who that is. Anyway, from here we head back into Faron Woods, where we meet with the sorceress Alana, before facing off against her evil half Sia at the Valley of Seers. For those of you that have played Age of Calamity and not this game, unfortunately we're not able to switch between different characters, meaning a lot of time is spent just running from objective to objective, which certainly adds to the overall time. We have to close 3 Gates of Souls, and they're located in different areas. The game splits off into 3 different sections at this point, and these paths can be completed in any order. This is where the game really pours on on the fan service, as it has us revisiting old fan favorite locations in a multitude of different Zelda games. I decided to first venture into the lands of Ocarina of Time, and here you'll see characters like Darunia and Ruto, and have to either defeat them in battle or rescue them as you did in previous games. It's at the end of this path that we find out the big reveal, that Sheik was Zelda all along. Who would have thought? Anyway, up in the sky we go, where we meet with a familiar entity named Fi, or Fi, as this game calls it.
Link followed Fi's advice.
Wait, Fi? Isn't it Fi? Have I really been pronouncing it wrong my whole life? This arc, if you will, has us fighting Girahim once again, who's far easier in this game, as well as this monstrosity. This is where the story and cutscenes don't necessarily line up with the gameplay, because here I'm clapping Girahim's cheeks with Fi, but in the cutscene straight after, well, it's Link doing it. With him defeated though, that marks the second gate of souls closed, meaning there's just one remaining. This one takes place in the Twilight Realm, meaning we get to reunite with the devilish imp, or at least fight her off at first before joining her to take down Zard. There's also a scene where we pull down the moon on top of a dragon. Honestly, this game has some of the coolest moments. With all three gates closed, it's revealed that Ganondorf has been partially restored after Cia collected 3 fragments of his spirit. That being said, Cia then seals him, before naming herself as the true evil and the one to reclaim not only the Triforce but Link as well. Honestly, this story is not this game's strong suit. Meanwhile, our squad has arrived at the Temple of the Sacred Sword, as Zelda believes the legendary blade contained within the temple is required to rid the world of evil. We have to once again fight our way through hordes of ghost forces who protect the sacred blade. After activating the 3 statues situated around the temple grounds, the temple doors open to reveal the Master Sword in all of its glory. With one final push, we pull the legendary blade out and raise it to the heavens, marking a relatively quick experience when compared to the rest of the series. I wish the same could be said for this next game. Now, Breath of the Wild is interesting. Because it's the first time the franchise truly adopted an open world design, it means there's no particular story segment we need to complete in order to reach the Master Sword. You could go straight to Korok Forest and attempt to pull it out of its pedestal if you wanted. Unfortunately, our old friend the Deku Tree informs us that we'll die if we try it without considerable strength. Okay, so what exactly do we need to do in order to obtain this legendary sword? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We just need to have 13 hearts in total. Now there's 2 main methods in obtaining heart containers in Breath of the Wild. One of them involves recapturing the Divine Beast and taking out the Blights of Ganon, and the other, more simpler method, is to go around completing the millions of shrines located around the map. These award us with Spirit Orbs, and exchanging 4 of them at the Goddess statues results in either a stamina vessel or a heart container. With those goals in mind, let's wake up from our 100-year slumber and be greeted with a fantastic opening sequence. I still get goosebumps to this day watching this. From here we run over to the Temple of Time before ascending up the first tower of the game. For whatever reason I thought I had the paraglider already, and well, yeah. Once we successfully get down to the bottom of the tower, we are greeted by this old guy who tells us to complete the 4 tutorial shrines, granting us access to the 4 essential ruins of Breath of the Wild. We then travel back to the Temple of Time where we exchange our first 4 Spirit Orbs for, wait, a stamina vessel? I thought we were gunning for heart containers. See, while 13 hearts are the end goal, we don't necessarily need to only get hearts, and stamina, as we'll come to see, is far more important as it allows us to run, climb, and glide for much longer. From here we scale the temple and meet the old man who reveals himself to be the spirit of King Rhoam. He gives us his paraglider as promised, and from here the whole world is our oyster. Literally. We can go anywhere and do anything at this point, and because we're not using any glitches or exploits, the first thing I thought was to go get a horse. Eventually I stumbled across a horse, named them an ultra original never seen before name, and stuffed her with apples to form that tight knit bond. Now at this point I was kind of stumped. See, I wanted to just rush headfirst into shrines and complete all of them instantly, but I ran into a few problems. Mainly the fact that I was getting one-shot by pretty much everything. What? Huh? He rolled over and died. With that in mind, I considered getting some armor and remembered that Hateno Village sells that soldier set, which is pretty decent and easy to upgrade. While on my way to Hateno Village, I ran through Kakariko Village and got scammed by the Great Fairy. Not to worry though, as we'll be using her later. Along the way, I also completed as many shrines as I possibly could. These were usually ones without quest requirements or special items. Once at Hateno Village, I picked up the soldier set, travelled back to Kakariko Village, exchanged another 4 spirit orbs for a heart container, and upgraded my soldier set with the help of the Great Fairy. From here I locked in and just started grinding shrines. Shrines for the most part are fairly simple and don't usually take that much time to complete. It's getting to them that really cuts into the time. About 4 hours into the run, I started to realize that I could have optimized a lot of things, like saving the modest and major strength test for when I had better weapons, or going around to each stable first so I'd have a network of fast travel shrines with quick access to Epona. The hardest part about sticking to this challenge though was the fact that I was playing Breath of the Wild. Look, I enjoy farming shrines as much as the next guy, and by that I mean I wanted to die. But when you're given the freedom to roam around this glorious world of Hyrule, of course I was bound to get sidetracked. Now these off-the-path adventures weren't completely useless because I was still aiming for a shrine at the end of them, but I mean, getting lost at the end of the Gerudo Desert for minutes on end, just to complete a single shrine and unlock their second Great Fairy that I never actually went on to use? Like, really? Oh, this was a waste of time. Speaking of the Gerudo, I also snuck into their town and talked to Riju for absolutely no reason. I was never going to complete Vah Naboris in this challenge, so I have no idea why I even wasted time entering the place. That being said, for the next few hours I completed shrine after shrine after shrine, and I glided from shrine to tower to death to shrine. That was my Breath of the Wild experience for hours, and when I finally completed 36 shrines, I decided to switch tactics. I'd been grinding shrines for what felt like a lifetime, so instead I decided to finish off with a Divine Beast. That being said, there's really only two choices here in terms of speed. Either Vah Medoh, which I probably should have done because it gives me Revali's Gale, and now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, that was probably the smart way of doing it, and now I'm kind of considering going back and replaying the whole thing, but that wouldn't be genuine, so instead, I went and did Vah Ruta. That's mainly because in this playthrough so far, I had stumbled across Prince Sidon and made my way to Zora's Domain. Because of this, I had already started Vah Ruta's questline and assumed it would be faster to just finish off the elephant instead. I bought out all the shock arrows at the fish market in Lurelin Village before meeting back up with Zardon at the East Reservoir Lake. After hitting the 4 orbs with shock arrows, we gained access to the rampant elephant where we activated the 5 terminals. From here, we can venture forth to the bottom floor where we can face off against Waterblight Ganon. Now, I was far too strong for this fight, and after hitting him a few times and knocking him down with the arrows, he was cooked. This gave us the final heart container we needed and also freed the spirit of Best Girl. That being said, we don't quite have 13 hearts currently. We have 9 and 4 points put into stamina, but there's one final trick we can use. See, at Hateno Village there's a special statue called the Horn Statue. This guy will buy and sell heart containers and stamina vessels, meaning all we need to do is sell him our stamina vessels and buy them back as heart containers. This takes a little while, but once that was done, we can travel over to the Korok Forest where I finally had the capacity to pull out the Master Sword and complete Breath of the Wild in just over 6 hours. From here, it's only right that we travel back to the past in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity to figure out exactly how things got to this point. The first thing we notice is that Hyrule is once again being overrun by Calamity Ganon, with guardians rampaging all over a burning Hyrule. Thankfully though, there is a small robot here that supposedly flew back in time to warn our heroes of the coming revival. You can tell we're in the past as King Brome is no longer a spirit, Link is still a knight of the Hyrule Empire, and the guardians haven't even been chosen yet. The gameplay itself is pretty much exactly the same as the first Hyrule Warriors, but there are a few key differences. The main one is the fact that we can now switch between our heroes. This feature is a crucial addition as we can now order each hero to scout out different sections of the map, significantly speeding up the completion of multiple objectives. From here we meet with Zelda, and alongside Impa we travel with our new robot companion to meet up with Purah, who's looking awfully young. Here we confirm that the visions seen are from the near future, and it's up to us to stop the calamity before it's too late. That's when we get the idea to find 4 pilots, one for each of the 4 divine beasts. At this point, we can choose to complete the next 4 missions in any order we wish. I decided to start with the Gerudo mainly because I like Urbosa's moveset and believe it has a lot of AoE potential. Upon arriving in the desert, we see that Urbosa isn't too welcoming, forcing us to fight our way through armies of Gerudo before entering the main hall. Upon ordering the death of Zelda, Urbosa is zapped by the real Urbosa, the fake then being revealed as the dumbass Master Koga. It's from this point that we can actually play as Urbosa. And I mean, can you blame me for wanting to unlock her first? This mission also goes to show just how effective sending each hero is to a different location, because it allows us to switch between them on the fly, saving an immense amount of running time that we had to do in Hyrule Warriors. After clapping Master Koga and clearing out the remaining Yiga clan, Urbosa agrees to pilot the divine beast Vah Naboris. I then travelled over to Zora's Domain to catch up with our childhood friend Princess Mipha. Again, the domain is raided by a horde of monsters, and in the chaos we learn that Prince Zardon has gone missing, so it's up to us to find him. From here we slash through countless bokoblins and elemental moblins, and again it's important that we send our heroes off in different directions to cover a large portion of the map, as it allows us to complete each objective very quickly. Our final showdown has us facing off against one of the toughest enemies in Breath of the Wild, the dreaded Lynel. While he's just as tanky in this game, it's not nearly as difficult to burn him down. After we force the Lynel to run, we see Prince Zardon hiding behind a tree, and just look how small and cute he is. And if you don't think that's Prince Zardon, don't worry, he still has his signature smile. With the monsters not letting up, Mipha decides to pilot the divine beast Vah Ruta, and when I say Mipha, I mean us, the player. These small sections aren't very long and mainly just require holding down the fire button, as the divine beasts are extremely overpowered in these segments. With 2 champions on board, it's time to convince the last 2.
So of course I'm on board with your plan.
Oh, well, that was easy. But regardless of Daruk's enthusiasm, we learn that Vah Rudania is far up on Death Mountain and is surrounded by monsters. And you know what that means. We have to fight our way through it. This area sees us facing off against the ginormous Igneo Talus. Twice, before getting to pilot the divine beast as we absolutely incinerate thousands of fodder enemies. With Daruk recruited, we venture over to Rito Village to meet the coolest yet most arrogant champion of them all. Thankfully we don't need to rug up even though it's freezing cold here, and instead we can spend all our time slashing through Rito soldiers and captains. When we do finally reach Rito Village, the ace makes his grand appearance. Now admittedly, there's no better feeling in this game than just beating Revali's ass in this fight. I mean, dude is a certified Link hater, so you know we gotta show him who's the real chosen one. That being said, even after bodying him, the game shows us going toe to toe with him before being stopped by Zelda. Even after agreeing to pilot Vah Medoh, this guy still continues to be an ass, and I'm not sure what's worse, him hating on us or me thinking he's a badass for doing so. With all the champions unified, we wait as Zelda tries to awaken her dormant powers. We're then raided by the Yiga clan, which sees us protecting Zelda from Suga, the right hand of the inverted eye. What's that? Who's the left hand? Yeah. I got nothing. I should mention that I essentially power leveled a single weapon to the highest attack power possible for each mission, as I thought that'd be the most effective way in saving time. After successfully holding off the Yiga clan attack, the team ventures into Korok Forest where a certain blade is waiting for us. You may notice the game suggests certain levels for each stage, but honestly you can kind of ignore these if you're not too far off. Revali gets his time to shine as we pilot Vah Medoh across the skies, destroying a whole bunch of outposts in the process. From here we venture into the Korok Forest where we meet Hestu, who guides us through the forest. While making our way through the forest, we have to split up one last time to destroy 4 phantoms mimicking the 4 champions. With them thwarted, we face off against the Stalnox before arriving at the center of the forest. Here we see someone else has beat us to the punch, and it seems like he's the one that summoned all these phantoms. Link puts up a good fight, but eventually our level difference catches up to us and we're sent flying towards the pedestal. How convenient. Before Zelda can be killed, a light illuminates and destroys the 4 phantoms. Link turns around to see a sword wedged in the pedestal, and it's here where we pull out the legendary Master Sword. With this sword, the phantoms are light work, and so begins our final fight against Asta, the Prophet of Doom. I know we've technically finished the goal for this game, but it's weird to not mention how this level ends. That being said, even with the Master Sword this guy can take a beating, but after a hard fought battle we eventually force Asta to retreat. The great Deku Tree once again bestows its endless wisdom upon us and tells us the fate of Hyrule rests in our hands. And if you want to know the rest of the story, play the game. That being said, let's travel from the prequel to the sequel in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, Tears of the Kingdom is probably the most interesting entry with regards to this video. Because it takes place following the events of Breath of the Wild, Link technically starts with the Master Sword. In fact, as we're exploring underneath Hyrule Castle and listening to Zelda lose her mind over all these ancient ruins, the Master Sword itself reacts to something far deeper, confirming that yes, in fact we do have the Master Sword. And not only that, but you actually get to control Link and swing it around. So that got me thinking, well, should this instance count? I mean, technically speaking, it should, which would make Tears of the Kingdom not only the easiest game in terms of obtaining the Master Sword, but by far the fastest as well. Now, for those of you who have played the game, and I hope you have if you're watching this video, you'll know that not even 10 minutes later, the Master Sword is shattered and left in a decayed state. Because of this, I decided not to count this brief moment with the Master Sword as a legit run, and instead would time how long it'd take to get the restored Master Sword. That being said, as I've briefly mentioned, the mummified Ganondorf quickly saps not only our hearts but our clothes as well as we awaken to a mysterious voice. We pick up our now decayed Master Sword and make our way through the rest of the chamber before diving into a title drop that I believe rivals Breath of the Wild's. Goosebumps aside, the observant among you may have noticed a peculiar entity flying around the Sky Islands. This dragon, while a mystery at release, not only plays a massive role in the game's story, but even more so in relation to this video, as it marks our final goal. With that in mind, we dive into the water below and make our way over to the Temple of Time. Unfortunately, our new arm isn't powerful enough to open it, and we were told by Rauru to visit the shrines surrounding the island in order to restore its sacred light. Just like in Breath of the Wild, these 4 shrines give us new abilities that will be crucial when it comes to solving future puzzles. We exchange our spirit orbs for a heart container, which is a bit annoying, before opening the final door. From here we once again spot our target soaring through the clouds before jumping to the land of Hyrule below. From here I applied the same sort of strategy as I did with Breath of the Wild, which mainly consisted of me rushing to complete a bunch of shrines. Now with that in mind, you might be wondering why I complained about receiving a heart container from the first goddess statue. And that's because instead of 13 hearts, this time we need 2 full stamina wheels to pull out the Master Sword. Overall, this isn't nearly as bad, as it means we technically only need to complete 20 shrines to fill a second stamina wheel, but as we'll come to find out, this wasn't exactly the solution in my case. Upon landing in Hyrule, we quickly visit Purah at Lookout Landing before talking to Hoz at Hyrule Castle. We then return to Lookout Landing, where Purah fills us in on the new Skyview Towers and hands us a paraglider. From here the game opens up and we're free to do whatever we want really. That being said, the first thing I did was once again look for a horse. This took an embarrassingly long time to achieve, but with Epona V2 in action we can now start scouring the starting areas for shrines and more importantly, Skyview Towers. These towers are extremely important in the context of this run, as they launch us far into the sky, which not only helps a lot in the traversal of Hyrule, but it's crucial when it comes to trying to land on this dragon. Over the next 2 hours, I essentially just rushed through Hyrule, completing shrines and unlocking Skyview Towers. Not to flex or anything, but I'd like to think I was keeping a pretty solid pace. At this point, I had collected enough spirit orbs to exchange them into stamina vessels, except I didn't exchange them all into stamina vessels, and instead chose 4 stamina vessels and 1 heart container. Again, this may seem like a crucial mistake, but trust me, I wasn't completely insane when making this decision. Okay, maybe I was. But hear me out first. See, there are multiple ways to reach the Light Dragon in Tears of the Kingdom. The simplest method involves just teleporting around the map and looking up into the sky, but because I only had a few Skyview Towers unlocked, this method wasn't very appealing nor plausible. Instead, I decided to cure the Great Deku Tree, as it unlocks the Master Sword questline, which not only gives us the exact location of the Light Dragon, but also makes her fly lower towards the ground. That being said, we first had to reach Korok Forest, which involved diving into the depths and using Ascend to pop back out of the ground. I should also note that I was picking up Poes along the way, which we'll be needing to buy a few things later. I did also make my way towards Rito Village and completed a small portion of its questline before giving up on it once I reached the Sky Islands. Now at the time I had thought of this as a pretty big mistake, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise by the end of the run. See, originally I had planned on using the cursed statue to exchange heart containers for stamina vessels, just like I had done in Breath of the Wild. The only problem with this method though was that I had to complete the Wind Temple to even unlock the cursed statue, which honestly I thought would take far longer than just doing 4 more simple shrines. Now this curing process was always going to be the roughest part of the run. See, to cure the Great Deku Tree, we have to not only deal with a set of Gloom Hands, but also Phantom Ganon. To prepare, I bought the Hylian armor set, picked up the Royal Claymore, which does double damage during flurry rushes, and also a few bomb flowers with the Poes I collected in order to deal with the Gloom Hands. I also had a few fused weapons by this point and just decided to wing it. Let's just say it wasn't as simple as I had originally hoped.
Holy shit. Wait, he's doing the splits.
Phantom Ganon is by no means a difficult mini-boss, but at this point in the game I had barely functioning armor, my weapons were doing fuck all damage, and his hits practically one-hit me. Or at least they would have, if I didn't use those extra spirit orbs to gain that extra heart container. See, I told you I wasn't insane. That being said, this guy gave me some serious trouble, but after a few attempts, many of which completely exhausted my whole arsenal of weapons, we did finally get him down. We then talked to the Great Deku Tree to unlock the Hero's Sword quest. The only problem was now I had to complete another 4 shrines to make up for that extra heart container I grabbed. Once these were completed though, it was time to seek out this dragon, and would you look at that, it's right next to Rito Village. All that remains is launching off the Skyview Tower here and gliding over to it. Now remember when I said completing that small part of Tulin's questline was a blessing in disguise? This is exactly why. I honestly have no idea if I would have made it to the dragon's updraft if I didn't have Tulin's gust ability to help speed me along, but considering how low I was even with it, I'm not confident I would have made it, which would have cost me so much more time. Even so, we make our way up to the front of the dragon and hold on for dear life as our stamina bars drain. Eventually we get to pull this legendary blade from Zelda as we raise it towards the heavens in one of the coolest scenes to date. I definitely think I could have cut off a lot of time by not dying as much and other optimizations with pathing and shrine choice. Honestly, if I had just gone straight to Rito Village, completed Tulin's questline, beat Colgera and got the heart container from him and also unlocked the cursed statue at the same time, I think that might have actually been the fastest method, but I'll let someone else try that. Either way, I'm genuinely surprised at just how fast you can obtain the Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom, especially when Breath of the Wild felt like such a grind in comparison. Now, as I said at the start of the video, I am definitely no speedrunner, and while I was trying to complete these games in a quick manner, I didn't use any guides or forward planning and relied entirely on my memory of each game, as I thought that would give more genuine results. That being said, for those interested, I have also included times from glitchless speedruns of the same game, so you can kind of compare them against mine and see how fast you could obtain the Master Sword if you were actually good. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do drop a like and consider subscribing, and I hope to see you all in the next one.